What's going on, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar, and today I have the pleasure of having Mr. Cullen Bunn join me for an interview. How's it going, sir?
It's going all right. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a great way to kick off a Monday talking to one of my favorite creators on here. So,
Well, I'll
uh,
do my best to ruin it. Don't worry.
big fan of your work, man. Big fan of your
Thank
work. I've been following it for a long time. I think for me, I got a little bit of a late start because I started getting the Six Gun in collected editions and trade paperbacks. But as soon as I saw those Gunslinger editions and definitive editions, I was like, okay, I gotta upgrade to those.
Yeah, those are pretty. They're pretty great ways to read that series. I think those the gunslingers and the big heavy hardbacks. They're great.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those. And then eventually you started doing more independent stuff, and then you went over to Marvel. You've done work at DC. You've got work published at Image, Aftershock, Dark Horse, Dynamite, and holy moly! My question is, dude, how I think that I read a lot. How I think you write more than I read, though.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. And there was a time a few years ago that I was definitely. I was writing a lot of comics, uh, and it was a good problem to have. Yeah, I mean, the output's slowed down a little bit in recent years. So it's I mean, I still feel like I try to be as productive as I can, but I think the stuff that's coming out right now, it's slowed down a little bit. One, because of the world, but the state of the world, but it was slowing down even before the world kind of imploded.
I mean, there was a time you were writing several books, working on your own stuff, and then working for different publishers.
Yeah.
And were you just time management has always been your gift, or
Yeah, I mean,
you just didn't sleep?
well, I mean, to some degree, I mean, there was a time early in my career when I was doing this while I had a full-time job
Whoa.
doing marketing. Um, so especially during that time, I wasn't sleeping. But the the bottom line is I like to work. I like to do it, and when I stop enjoying it, then that's time to stop doing it. And I just I enjoy it, and I come down and I put in a full day, at least 5 days a week. Lately, it's been 7 days a week, but because I don't have anything else to do. but yeah, I mean, I come in just like I worked for so long in the corporate world, and I keep that same schedule every day in terms of writing.
Now that's a great way of looking at it. Like if you set yourself the schedule, like, hey, I'm already doing this for something I don't want to be doing. I
Right.
might as well take that schedule and work it towards something I want to be doing. I think
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Now, how much of that has changed though since you've had you got a kid now, you're married, you guys have, you all have moved to St.
Yeah.
Louis, right?
Well, I was living in St. Louis. We moved out of St. Louis.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. My schedule hasn't changed that much. I was not a full-time writer until after my son was brought into our life.
Okay.
So, it was, there was a bit of a learning curve, I guess, um, but I was, I had a full-time job, and then I was writing after my son went to bed at night, for the first couple of years of his life. And then I had to figure out how to make it work. And then when I became a full-time writer, my schedule didn't change much. I mean, we took him to a daycare because my wife was working at the time. So he had to go to there was a lady that would, watched him
Hmm.
during the day. But other than that, it was, and then school. So, but yeah, it really didn't change much. There have been times where my output
is reduced for, I get distracted with life just like everybody else. But for the most part, this is what I do. So I've got to, if I'm not down here writing, I don't get paid. So, and then there's no food on the table and no roof over our heads. So that's a motivating factor for me.
Eating usually is a motivating factor for most people. How did all of this get started? How did you? Obviously, I assume you read comics. You were a fan of the horror genre, just based on your work. But I'm just assuming things. How did all of this begin for you? Like, where did this love of comics, and where did you one day go, I think I want to do that, or I can do that?
I loved comics when I was a little kid. It was my introduction to reading. Mm-hmm. I was a huge fan of comics, and I grew up in this era when we could go to garage sale or flea market and buy, there was a guy at a flea market that I used to beg my dad to take me to on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And out of the back of a pickup truck, he sold grocery bags full of random comics for $5. It was 50 comics for $5. Deal. And you could either buy a DC bag, a Marvel bag, or just a mix of, it was usually Charlton comics and stuff like that. But I would save my allowance and I would go and buy a bag of those comics. It was just random. So there was no rhyme or reason to it besides Marvel and DC. And I would get those bags of comics and just read that's what I enjoyed doing. I liked reading those comics. When I was in 5th grade, I did a weekly comic that I wrote and drew for all my friends. And I wish I still had copies of it because it's the most ridiculous, stupid thing ever. But it starred me and all my friends as like space adventurers, and we would go on these crazy adventures because my dad's business had a photocopier. So I would, draw this comic, and then I would just photocopy it up and take them out and give them to all my friends. And I did that every week. And then in 6th or 7th grade, I started going to local comic conventions and selling self-published comics at local Comic Cons.
6th or 7th grade. You're in middle school and you're doing that.
Yeah,
that's hustle. That's the hustle right there.
They were pretty bad, but
but what other 6th and 7th grader were doing that though? That's props, man.
And so I've always been interested in comics, and I always wanted to tell stories. And I didn't care if it was comics or, short stories or novels. I didn't care. I just wanted to tell stories. But because I loved comics, I did keep trying to get into that. I had no idea how to break into the comic book market. I just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I have a degree in creative writing, and one of the things they don't teach you is how to, or didn't at the time, was how to actually get your work in front of publishers. It's just something they just never bothered with. And at the time, they didn't want to talk about comic books either, because they didn't see it as a viable profession, I guess, or a literary ambition. But
you can see those movies now,
right? But so I just didn't know how to do it. So I focused on the things I could understand how to submit, which was short stories and novels. I knew how to do that. And I didn't focus on comics as much. I was sending proposal after proposal out to Marvel and DC and getting the form rejection letters just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. I just didn't know what to do. So after college, I got a job working at a comic book store, as you do with a degree in creative writing.
Right.
And while I was managing a comic shop, and one of the other managers and I would get together occasionally. His name was Brian Hurt, and he was a very talented artist. He was an aspiring artist. And we started talking about doing a comic book together then. And that was years before we did our first comic together, which was The Damned. And The Damned.
Yeah, that was Omnibus, wasn't it?
Yeah. The Damned was the book that got my foot in the door, because awesome. Brian knew some of the people. He had done a couple of fill-in things for Omnibus. Mm-hmm. So he came to me and said, "Hey, I think I can get this publisher to read our proposal."
So we put a proposal together for The Damned. Actually, I think The Damned probably was the second thing we pitched to Oni Press. We had one other book that we pitched that they never accepted, and it's still a book we'd love to do. But
oh, cool.
But
okay.
So they took The Damned, they liked it, we did it. That was my foot in the door, and I was still at this point working full time because it didn't pay a lot. But from The Damned, I did a book with Oni called The Tooth, and then I did another book with Brian Hurt called The Sixth Gun, and that started getting some attention from other publishers and editors. And I had some folks from DC call me and want me to write some stuff for them. And then I had some folks from Marvel call me. And this was all around the time New 52 was getting ready to kick off at DC.
Yeah, man. And I'm very familiar with this era right here.
Yeah, so it was around that time, and I was talking to DC, and they had 3 books that they wanted me to pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And I put the pitches together, and we were going to move forward. And I talked to Axel Alonso at Marvel, and I said, hey, just so you know, DC is asking me to do some books, so my schedule's going to get a little bit tighter. And he said, no, they're not. I'm going to offer you an exclusive, and you're going to write for us. And I said, okay. So I talked to DC, and I said, if you guys can offer me an exclusive, maybe, maybe I'd stick with you. I know these books are already on the slate, what I'll be writing. And
really quick, I'm sorry to interrupt here. For people that don't know how big an exclusive is to somebody that's writing freelance, it's kind of a big deal. Well, it is a big deal.
It is definitely early in your career. It can be for me, it was the piece of the puzzle that I needed in order to feel comfortable quitting my full-time job, because an exclusive basically guarantees you a certain number of books.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because, and mine was for 2 years. So I knew for 2 years what I would be working on, and that I would have, money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and DC just wasn't ready to do an exclusive at the time. So, I turned to Marvel. I wrote for Marvel for a couple of years under an exclusive contract. And then, honestly, I think they never knew what they wanted to do with me when I was under the exclusive contract. It was
Marvel?
Yeah, I think they just they're like, well, let's try this. And there were all these little projects coming my way. And then interestingly enough, after the exclusive expired at Marvel, I got more work with Marvel than I'd ever had. I mean, I was getting hit constantly with requests for me to write, whatever book.
So then your exclusive was during the time of Uncanny X-Men and Magneto? Or
no, those books were after my exclusive.
Really? So we're talking like Deadpool then? Like the Deadpool kills the Marvel?
I did do the Deadpool. I think Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe was probably during my exclusive contract.
Okay.
It definitely was. But even it was like some of the Captain America team up books.
Yeah.
I was doing things like that. But yeah, after my exclusive expired,
mm-hmm.
It was weird. It was like, for me at least, the doors opened, and then I was doing a lot more. I was doing a ton more projects with Marvel.
That's cool.
And then I was able to do work with DC and really whoever I wanted to at that point.
Yeah, I was following your work then, man. I love Sinestro. You went over to Marvel. You wrote one of the best Magneto stories ever.
It was a fun book. I really enjoyed working on those. Yeah.
And that definitely deserves to have some kind of oversized hardcover. There is enough for an omnibus. I'm just saying.
I agree. There's 24 issues of that Magneto series, so they can do an omnibus.
Already mapped it up, man. I think that's when I do every year I do my most wanted Marvel omnibus, most wanted X-Men top 10 omnibus, and Magneto always makes the list. It's a great book for a lot of people that didn't read it. He's such a complicated character, and I think it takes a really good writer to understand the complexity of that character. Yeah, the same for Sinestro, though.
Yeah, well, and I was doing those books at the same time, which was really weird.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really weird to write Sinestro and Magneto. I'm pretty sure I was offered both of those books in the same month because I was like, well, how do I make them different? I'm doing two books about these villains. How am I going to make these books stand out from one another? But yeah, I was a big fan of both of those books. Were a big deal to me, and I really loved them.
So this is something we talked about earlier. Before we started the live cast, I was mentioning how, man, yeah, how many books of yours that I've read that I'm like, I'm gonna, because eventually when you start reading comics, you start following characters as kids. Like you follow the characters, and then you get to a certain age, you're like, okay, I'm following an artist, and then you follow the voices, you follow the writers that you're like, oh, this guy's. You get to a certain age, you're just like, oh, this guy's really good. He understands these characters, and not just his characters, he has his own work out there. And through, you did a lot of work for Aftershock and Image and Dark Horse. And one of the biggest questions that I get, because I'm a collected editions channel, is when is so-and-so going to get reprinted? The biggest one right now being Harrow County from Dark Horse. And I've talked to Harrow County. I've talked to Dark Horse about this, and they gave, since my contact over there just told me right now they're focusing on the Omnibus.
Yeah.
But as somebody like you, you're a creator, you have your works being published at Image, at Dark Horse, at Aftershock. How much say do you have in these things? As a creator, because it is your creator-owned book, so
yeah. Well, it's different with different publishers how much you can say, and I mean, I feel like with most creator-owned stuff, the publishers are going to give you, they want you to have a voice in what they do with the books.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, it's always going to end up being the final decision maker is going to be sales and demand. Those are forget the publisher, forget the writer, forget the artist. The decision maker is, the two decision makers, sales and demand. And yeah, I think there's still demand for those Harrow County collected editions. I think they're beautiful books. They're priced right. They're great editions.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see them again, but right now there's no plans for it. And part of that is, we've got an omnibus edition coming out right now, and they do want to focus on that. And those omnibus editions are great too. I mean, they're great for people who want to read Harrow County sort of on a lesser budget. You can just dive in with 16 issues of the series, in that paperback. And I think there's room for all of those editions. For me, and I get asked that about those, I would bet you in the last 3 weeks, I've been asked maybe over a dozen times by different people about this Harrow County. I'm not joking, dude. I get asked at least like 5 times a week. Yeah. So
since my video went up and a month later, volume 2 sold out, and then eventually I think volume 4 went out of print.
2 and 3 are the ones that are really hard to find. 3?
Okay.
I don't know. They're tough to find.
Yeah. And they're beautiful books too. So
yeah. So I would say, if fans really want them, I think the thing to do is for them to tell Dark Horse. I think if Dark Horse starts hearing, hey, we want these hardcovers, eventually they'll reprint them. And I'd love to see. And look, I slept on Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the hardcovers.
Mm-hmm.
And then just recently I decided, you know what? I'm going to buy those hardcovers of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
And then I'm not going to buy those hardcovers of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
But it gets rough, right? Because then the license went over to Boom, and now Boom is doing their own library editions, and they don't, they're not like Dark Horse. Yeah, I see that you're a fellow connoisseur back there. I got to highlight you. You got a K-Lax back there.
A what? Oh, is that the shelf? Yeah, the shelf. Yeah,
that's what we call it, man. Look at that. Okay, let's see. BPRD. Yeah, nice. Now those hardcovers.
Most of the stuff on there is hardcovers. There's a few paperbacks, but I purged, I'd say 80% of the paperback stuff a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have 4 of those shelves in the house. One there, and
my man,
and one here. And then I have a couple in our in the downstairs library. Those don't have, one of those doesn't have comics, and then one has. I've gotten into having my floppy comics bound into hardcover.
Yeah,
so I make my own, my own hardcover editions.
Dude, you and I are kindred spirits. We're okay. Yeah.
So I do a ton of those now. That's actually, if I were going to say as a hobbyist, what am I into? It's into. I buy floppy comics and I get them bound into custom hardcovers. Okay, so wait a minute. How? Dude, there's no way you have the time to do that.
Because
I've got a guy who's
writing.
just for me.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. But you still
I
have
send them out to him. I send them. I you know,
You
and
still
I
have to
know
map it.
it's my collection has has died down a little bit just from time because I don't have time to sort them all out. But I've been slowly over the last year and a half, 2 years building up a couple of boxes of things that I'm going to have that I'm going to send out and have bound up. Like I got all the Marvel Treasury editions, the big oversize. I got all the Marvel and DC Treasury editions, and I'm going to send those out and have them bound into hardcover. And
it is definitely a lot of fun. I'm with you, man. For 4 years I've been working on the Superman Triangle years after the Death and Return, and I have them all. And for 2 years I've had them. It's just a matter of just finding the time to just set aside and make sure you have it mapped correctly. Make sure, because a lot of people don't understand that the way that you lay the books out, I mean, that's what they're getting, right? So whoever binds your books is going to get it that way. So if you accidentally leave issue 15 in between issue 20 and 21, that's on you.
Yeah, you could end up messing up, but you can do some really cool things with it too. I mean, I got into it because I bought.
Is that an Omaha bound shout out?
Oh, that is an Omaha bound shout out. But I got into it because I bought from a comic shop some custom bound editions of Indiana Jones.
Oh man!
And what they did was they bound the Marvel series, the Dark Horse series, everything, but they bound them in chronological order of the story rather than issue 1 through. So the first thing in that book is the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and it goes through that, and then the next thing is Temple of Doom because that takes place before Raiders of the Lost Ark. Then Raiders of the Lost Ark, then the Indiana Jones, and they did it. I mean, so someone put a lot of work and thought into how this should be laid out, and I was like, if you can do that with these trades or with these books, that's I can really control, so my Micronauts custom bind, I put X-Men and Micronauts in before.
Oh, you got that. That's awesome. Oh man, you just made me a happy man. You have a Omnibus too? Are you working on a Omnibus too, or?
I've already, that was one of the first ones I did. Yeah.
So back when I was first starting to do that, over oh my goodness, it's been 15 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get a set of books that I have a complete run of that there's no way Marvel is ever gonna collect in the omnibus format. So of course I went with Excalibur, and literally last year we got an Excalibur omnibus. But I still kept those. Now I still have the Superman stuff.
I like the customs. I have my Excaliburs bound. I like seeing the ads. I like seeing the covers right there with them. I like all that stuff.
It definitely takes you back to a time when. As you were reading them, and the ads are there, and there's all little space savers you can do when you can take out the back ad if you want to make sure there's enough room there. Man, we could talk about that for an hour, but okay. You're one of us, man.
That's a whole rabbit hole, man.
It is, but it's so fun to talk about. You're one of us. I saw that bookshelf, and I'm like, okay. I see. Are those Hot Toys or?
Or whatever they are, Hot Toys and Sideshows. Yeah, there are a few of them. I don't have many of them, but I have a few. I had to get. I could have gone down that rabbit hole too, and I didn't. But
those.
I've got my statues are over here on this wall, and my the top shelf is just junk, which you can't see, but it's just like junky toys that I liked when I was a kid.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that, man. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Now they're upgrading all those toys, Cullen.
Yeah, I don't need that.
I don't need it either, but I gotta have it.
I don't need the upgrades. I'm good with my dusty old 70s editions.
Man, there's some wonderful companies out these days that are catching in on us.
Look, the stuff looks amazing, but I have to draw the line somewhere. I have to. I can't buy everything.
We can try, but I'm with you. So, tell me, what are you currently working on these days? Now that you've established everywhere, just like I think you have, right? You've written just about a book for every publisher out there.
I've worked with almost every publisher. But yeah, I'm so mostly I'm working on creator-owned stuff these days. That's and I have several creator-owned books that are coming out in the next year that that I've been working on forever. I think Aftershock just announced
Phantom on the Scan, which is a 5-issue horror series that'll be coming out. So it's been announced. But I am working on a couple of things that aren't creator owned. I'm doing right now, currently, Dynamite is running a crowdfunding campaign for a Reanimator title that I did with Blackie Shepherd called Reanimator: The Eternal Lie. So that is coming out, or it's done. The book's done. It's being crowdfunded. It's on Indiegogo right now. That they're using it as a pre-order system for the book.
And I'll be leaving a link in the description of the video for anybody that wants to order that, please.
Yeah, and I think it'll be on Indiegogo for maybe another week or so, and then it's funded, so the book will be coming out. But they've got some neat stuff that in it, and that book is if you've read Reanimator comics before or watched the Reanimator movie, this book kind of takes all that and says, nah, this is a direct sequel to the original short story. So it's a new universe, I guess, with Reanimator. And that's on Indiegogo right now. And then I'm also working with Valiant on a few things. And Shadow Man is coming out in April. The first issue of Shadow Man comes out from Valiant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a book I'm pretty excited about as well. So, and that's one that you could go to your comic shop right now and pre-order that.
All right. So I just put the link into the script. I'm going to put this in the description of the video, and I also put it in the chat for anybody that wants to go and pre-order that. So, man, I was hoping I'd have your Omnibus by now. I literally ordered your Omnibus at the beginning of January. The stuff that has the Dark Arc storyline from Aftershocks. Yeah. How exciting is that to have your name with the word Omnibus on it?
It's a pretty cool. I wanted them to call it the Omnibun, but they wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it.
I guess there's a little bit of a letdown, but no, it's exciting to see, and that's a great, it's a great book. I mean, it's a massive collection of, I don't even know how many series are in that thing now. 6, 7 different books. So
I pre-ordered it when it was like 5 books in there. And they added a couple more.
Yeah, so it's it's that, and they did another book that was the hardcover collection of my original Dark Arc series. So those 2 books together are everything I've done at Aftershock up to this point.
Did they put Witchhammer in there?
Witchhammer's in there, yeah.
Oh, cool! I love, dude. That was, I think, when I read Witchhammer whenever I read 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, man, I do this this segment on the channel called Hidden Gems, books that people haven't heard of that I love showing people, and they're like, oh, let's go check it out. And I swear every one of my segments has your name on it. I'm like, oh, this is Cullen Bunn, so and so. You need to check it out.
Yeah, and that's a fun book too. It was and I'd love. I could say that about everything. I'd love to do another one. I'd love to do more. And again, it falls back to what we were talking about with Dark Horse and Harrow County. It's all a matter of demand and interest. But that's why I think a book like this, people who didn't see Witchhammer when it came out will be able to read that now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's got everything. I mean, it even has short stories that I did for Aftershocks, the Shock anthologies and things like that. Those are in there as well.
I was hoping it'd be here by now, but the delays of USPS and all that. I can wait. I'll have it. When I do my haul, I'll show it off. It looks awesome, and I can't wait to get it. I actually ordered that and Dark Arc, the hardcover, because I knew that story wasn't collected in that omnibus.
Yeah, but though they're really nice. They're really nice additions. And yeah, I'm very. It's gratifying to see those books in that kind of format. But honestly, I'm the kind of guy. I'm just happy to see my books out there. So I'm glad if people read them. So
we got a couple of questions I wanted to get to, and then we can talk a little bit more about Reanimator, because I love that movie, and that's kind of where actually I do. So here's a good question. Hi, Cullen. Which writers, both comics and non-comics, have been your greatest inspirations?
Woo! So in comics, I would say Bill Mantlo probably is the writer. I would say is my biggest inspiration. He wrote the comics that made me, I mean, I liked comics, but his books were the ones that made me love comics. I mean, it was so from a young age, and that was all because he was such an incredible world builder, which is what I really love about comics. You take something like Micronauts, which was based on a toy line that didn't at the time have a backstory at all. And he created this massive universe and this massive backstory all for Micronauts. So Bill Mantlo is a big influence for me. Non-comics, Joe Lansdale is a big influence. He also does some comic stuff. So I guess comics and and prose. Joe Lansdale's a huge influence. The first short story I ever sold, it never got published, but the first short story I ever sold was a tribute to a Joe Lansdale story. It was absolutely an homage to a Joe Lansdale story that I loved. So I mean, and then it's just there's so many. I mean, it's a huge list for me. It's hard to even narrow it down. Alan Moore, Grant Morrison. When I think of great stories, Garth Ennis. These are writers that I love these. I love the books that they did. And if you look at these shelves back here, probably the book shelves are loaded with their books.
I think it's important to also you mentioned a lot of writers that have a different range too in their writing. That's really cool. I was a big Bill Mantlo fan because of Micronauts, just like you. But I love this Hulk run, Alpha Flight, that stuff. And sadly, he hasn't.
The world has a way of kicking you right where it hurts.
Absolutely, man.
He's definitely gotten kicked.
He lost his brother last year. His character. Oh man, yeah, that poor guy. What about really quick with this question? This is my personal question. I know you like horror.
Sure. Just
a little bit, maybe. What were some of your inspirations, like, or even your favorite horror movies growing up, that you were like, I want to do that?
So writers wise, it's easy. Stephen King is obviously right there. Dean Koontz, Robert McCammon, those were writers that really. Thomas Ligotti, those were writers that inspired me in terms of horror. Movie wise, holy cow!
Man.
John Carpenter is a huge influence. David Cronenberg. So like The Thing, that's my favorite horror movie. Well, it goes back and forth between The Thing and Alien. If I say those are the, if I'm going to rank, there's the best horror movie.
Those were two of my 11. Now she's 11. Her 11 my 11-year-old daughter's favorite horror movies. Yeah, I had to introduce her to horror movies at a young age.
Yeah. I was a big fan of movies like that. And then I've just always, I'm just a fan of horror movies in general. When I was in high school, I decided I was going to do special effects makeup. That's what I wanted to do as a career.
Yeah.
And I probably wasn't really, I liked horror movies, but I probably wasn't like really into it until around, high school. And I wanted to, I started getting into doing, special effects makeup. And then I was reading Fangoria magazine and Gore Zone and everything. And then that kind of opened my eyes to a lot more writing that was being done in horror, and that, and then it just kind of went from there into writing horror stories and things like that.
Well, it's you definitely have. I mean, you have a calling for it. That's what I will say. You're really good at it, building the suspense and then the horror elements into it. But let me see. Here's one. This is a good question. Are there any series, this is from DBC All-Star, that you worked on that you felt your work had been cut short? Are there any plot threads from either your Venom runs, for example, that you still wanted to finish? Yeah, I love your Venom run too. Yeah, I can't wait to see that Omnibus.
All of them, all of those. I'm upset with all of the stories that have ended. And that's again, we're talking about guys like Bill Mantlo, but then you got to think of like Chris Claremont and his X-Men run, and John Byrne with I'm a guy who I love long runs on comics, and it's hard for me not to plan long runs. So when I took over Venom, I had pages and pages and pages and pages of plans for that series. Same with Magneto, same with Uncanny X-Men, same with X-Men Blue, same with Fearless Defenders. I had I mean, if you were to stack up the pages of notes and plans for those series, it's thousands of pages of story ideas and what I wanted to do with it. Unfortunately, for most comics, that just isn't the case anymore. In fact, I've been told by editors, if you get 12 issues, that's a long run these days. And there's definitely a thought process that among some editorial and publishing folks that it's better to end a series and start it with a different writer because you're going to get more sales on the first issue. And that's why you see so many stops and starts, because you've written a character, and the perception is readers aren't going to follow you with that character forever. So let's get a new writer. I mean, it's absolutely a perception that I've written X-Men before, so we don't need you to write X-Men right now. And that is among some publishers and editors, that's a philosophy, and I loathe it with everything that's in my being. But yeah, I have tons of stories from the Venom run that I wanted to get to. I mean, Reminder and I were, we planned up, and I mean, they're doing some very cool things right now. This is not belittling the stories that are coming out, but we definitely had, there was Reminder had this story with his symbiote war, and I had this story that I was building towards called The Descent, and those will never be resolved. And that's kind of stuff just drives me crazy. From a reader point of view, I hate not getting resolution on things.
Yeah, and as a reader, you almost have to get, back in the 90s, you got used to it, because in the 90s is when they started pulling a lot of these old writers off the books, and introducing the new guard. But you're right. I mean, nowadays it's a rarity. Nowadays it's a special thing to have, like, oh, Jonathan Hickman's going to be writing X-Men for a couple of years. Jason Aaron's writing Thor for 7 years. Unheard of. Those are
great runs, and that's
because
also,
they're able to build on it.
But it's very difficult for most series, and it's not necessarily. I mean, it's just tough for the sales on books aren't what they used to be, and it can be tough. But yeah, there's also that perception of, if you've written this character before, it's going to sell better if we get a different writer on the series,
right?
And that's one of the things. I tried to game the system when Magneto ended. I started writing Uncanny X-Men, and when Uncanny X-Men, they said, well, let's end that and launch something new. It was X-Men Blue.
Yep.
I wrote Magneto in all of those books because I was trying to tell a bigger story with Magneto, and I still didn't get to tell the story I wanted to. And I was pitching hard for a Brotherhood of Evil Mutants series when X-Men Blue ended. I was really pitching for a Brotherhood series starring Magneto and Polaris and this big cast, but it just never took off.
There is a little bit of heartbreak to that too, whenever you get to play with these toys and have to put them back. It's hard sometimes, because these are characters that you grew up reading about, and coming into it.
And I feel ownership when I'm writing them. They're not my characters, but I feel ownership in the stories. I get invested in them, and I really have these goals and ideas. And it's disappointing when that doesn't happen. It's also, those are the breaks of writing comics for characters that you don't own. And I mean, these publishers have to make the decisions that they feel are the best decision to keep their books in the market and keep people reading. Whether I agree with those decisions or not, I'm not the final say on that. So. Yeah. It is what it is. And I definitely disagree with some of those ideas and philosophies and decisions, but you know what? That's the way it happens. So,
and it's almost kind of the way that everybody's, unless it's creator owned, it's the way that they're accustomed to happening too.
Yeah, and even creator owned, it's tough anymore. I was just talking to someone the other day, and they were saying, I really want to do a 50-issue series like the Six Gun. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I just don't think you can. I just don't know. That's rarefied air for a book like The Six Gun to go 50 issues plus some miniseries. Harrow County is rarefied air that it went its 30-something issues.
Can I? And why is that?
It's just you have to hit a sweet spot in terms of sales. It's tough to it can be really difficult when you look at attrition on some comics. A first issue comes out and it sells a certain number, and before the first issue's even on the shelf, so nobody knows if it's good or not, it's number 2 is ordered at half that number. Yeah. So, and then, the attrition starts dropping. If you can't, you gotta start at a great number and find that sweet spot that can maintain the book and keep people reading. You have to have a publisher who is supportive of you, and, both Harrow County and Six Gun do very well in the trades and in the hardcovers and in the collected editions. And that helped us get to a point where we could do the floppy, the single issues for 50. Six Gun ran 50 and Harrow was 32. It's just, those were, to me, they're rarities. The other thing that makes them rarity is, Brian Hurt and Tyler Crook dedicated a huge chunk of their life to those series. And I didn't want to do them with anybody else. And I'm thankful that they, were able to dedicate their time to those books the way they did. But it's, artists, if I call an artist and say, hey, would you like to do a book together? They might say, yeah. And then I say, hey, it's going to be 50 issues. So it's going to be 7 years of your life. And they're like, wait a minute. I don't know if I can do that.
Cullen, I love you, but I think I'm going to pass.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough to deal with me for that long.
I think I love both of those books because you got to play the way that you wanted to. So this is a funny question. Have you ever get the Lucas fever and want to rewrite some of your older work?
I don't know that I really want to rewrite it or redo it. I do look at some older books and I'm like, man, this really was an imperfect book. There's stuff about it that I would do differently. And I'm not precious about my work. I can look at my stuff and say, oh man, I really dropped the ball on that one. There's and I think back on it, like The Damned, which was my first pro work and I'm very proud of that series. There's a scene in the first issue that I was like, man, that scene is 3 pages too long. I really should have condensed that down, things like that. But I would never go back and really do big changes to it.
No adding Jabba the Hutt to any of
it. Probably no big additions. I mean, if there were something like, if it were a series I did 10 years ago and we were re-releasing it and there was something in the series that I remember confused fans or really, kicked people out of the story and it was small, I might want to go back and adjust that, maybe a line of dialogue or something, but I wouldn't do major adjustments. I mean, and there are books that I'm very proud of that I recognize were not great. I mean, they were not perfect books by any means. They had some, flaws, but maybe the flaw is just part of it.
I agree with that statement. I think it's a really good statement. All right. So here's another question. Speaking of Six Gun, any chance of the hardcovers being reprinted? I missed out the first time.
So are the hardcovers of Six Gun out of print too? I
know the Gunslinger editions are gone.
Oh, the Gunslingers, I don't know that you'll see Gunslingers again. Those were always intended to be pretty, to be very limited. The hardcover editions I thought were still in print, and I think you can still get the regular deluxe editions of the Six Gun, and if they're not right now, you should be able to soon. I mean, I know there's some, my friend and sometimes co-writer Jimmy Z. Johnston owns a comic shop and he has not Gunslingers, but
I was going to say your friend was about to get a bunch of phone calls here after this episode.
He has deluxe editions in stock. I know.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll have to, let me check on that, but so keep follow me on Twitter or something and I'll find out for you because I could have. I mean, I had some Gunslingers at C2E2 last year on my table, so I didn't have many, but I had a couple. So I think there may still be some potential to get them.
They're out in the wild, but it's the chase. So this is a good question. As a new reader, because I have an answer, but I'd like to know what your answer is. The new reader to comic who never read something from you, what do you recommend?
So the best introductions to my work is either going to be The Sixth Gun or Harrow County. Hands down, I would recommend those books to anybody. If you're a sort of a superhero fan, like a Marvel fan or a DC fan, and you've never read a non-Marvel or DC book, a non-superhero book, then absolutely Sixth Gun, there's your book. Go to it. If you've read a lot of indie stuff anyway, Sixth Gun or Harrow County, you know, I was saying earlier how I'm not precious about my work. Those are, I take the Pepsi challenge on any single issue of Sixth Gun or Harrow County. I think they're great series. For whatever reason, I mean, every issue I am absolutely proud of from the beginning to the end of both of those books. So those are the ones I would first say, if you're going to read anything by me and to see who I am, those are the two that would top of the list.
I completely agree with both of those answers. And then we just set the bar so high, Cullen. Now
there's the tough part, because you're going to read those, and then not everything is Sixth Gun and Harrow County. But I think
those are, like you said, epics, though. Those are big.
Yeah. If you like those books, I think there are plenty of other books of mine that you will absolutely enjoy.
I'm a big fan of your superhero stuff. I think Sinestro and Magneto were freaking phenomenal.
If I were going to say superhero stuff, then yes, Sinestro or Magneto, or Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe, something like that. But
that's fun too.
Yeah,
but those books are so hard to find. The trade paperbacks are sold out for both Magneto and Sinestro. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it'd be a good time for an oversized hardcover.
Right. I agree. 1000%. Maybe when a Magneto movie comes out or something, they'll do a
maybe. Or you never know how WandaVision's going to end. You never know. So what inspired you to write Harrow County? What was the inspiration for that?
Harrow County is really, it's all about where I grew up, because I grew up in the country, and there were always, ghost stories and stories of old witches and bizarre happenings out in the woods. So Harrow County was inspired by that. It originally I was writing it as a novel that I was serializing online. And it just, there were several other writers who we were all doing like serialized novels that were supposed to be set in the same universe. And it was a great failed experiment. But the story stuck with me, even though I didn't, I never finished it in prose. Mm-hmm. So when Tyler and I started talking about doing a book for Dark Horse, it was maybe the third or fourth idea that we pitched around doing, and he really latched on to it. And it's about, growing up in the country and ghost stories that you hear and stories of old witches.
It's solid, and I love the characters. I love the supporting cast. It's great. And like you said, there's always room for more, maybe one day.
Well, with Harrow, we're doing Tales from Harrow County. So there was a miniseries that came out that the first one has been collected in trade paperback. But the plan is to do more of those miniseries. It's not an ongoing, but it's definitely like a series of miniseries, like BPRD or Hellblazer stuff. Yeah.
And those eventually would make a nice library edition as an extra.
They would make a nice library edition. So
yeah, absolutely. Let's take a couple more questions, and then we can go back, because I did want to ask you about how all that Reanimator started. Right. And let's see. Loved your Conan the Slayer run. Which Robert E. Howard character would you like to work in comics?
Yeah, Solomon Kane.
My man, good answer.
100% Solomon Kane. It's one of those situations where I've gotten this close. Maybe even a little closer than close. And, things, the world conspires against Solomon Kane. So,
you never know, though. I mean, we got an Omnibus. We did have an Omnibus coming out. We got more of the Cole stuff coming out later this year. So you never know when that character might show up.
Yeah.
Cullen, have you ever looked into making a manga or a book in a similar format?
I haven't. Well, I mean, the Damned, when we first collected it, we collected it in sort of a manga format. It's smaller, but then we ended up, when it was recollected later, it was full size.
I haven't looked at doing a manga book or something in that style. I think there are bits and pieces of manga style that I've pulled into, some of my work.
I can see that.
And I absolutely believe that some of the best horror stuff in the business is coming out in manga. And but it's a very specific style of storytelling, and there are tricks and tips you can pull out of it, but I don't know that I'd want to sit back and actually try to emulate, to try to say this is my manga comic or whatever.
I think you're absolutely
if
right.
Calls me and wants to do a book together, then yes, I will do one.
Oh man.
That would be that's a big ask though in the world. I think he doesn't need me.
Dude, you're a man of culture. You said Junji Ito. All right, among the artists you work with, who was your favorite?
Oh, come on, I
didn't ask it.
What's that meme with Road Warrior where he's like, nah, that's a trap. No, that's a trap. I love all of them equally. All of them equally.
When people, I ask several artists the questions, or several writers, like who's your favorite writer, who's your favorite artist to work with, or who's your favorite creation. And sometimes you hear that's like choosing your favorite child. What they don't know is I'm immediately answer, well, Lydia's my favorite child. Now, who is your favorite?
Yeah, no, that's a trap. No, thank you. Nice try. Nice try. That's probably one of the artists I've worked with under a pseudonym. They were.
Oh, here's an awesome question. When will you get a Hellblazer ongoing? Oh man.
I'm telling you again. You're asking the ones that I've tried. I've definitely tried to get a Hellblazer ongoing. It just I don't know that I've definitely not been as close as with Solomon Kane, but I've pitched Hellblazer series, and I've tried. I'd say I don't know if it'll ever happen, but that's one I would love to do. I would say I will say that the books I'm doing with Valiant, Shadow Man, and especially Punk Mambo, those books are me saying I'm not going to get to write a Hellblazer book, so here we go. Here's the Hellblazer book for the Valiant universe. So if that's the style of book you're looking for, either of those books would be up your alley for sure.
Okay, so it looks like the 6 gun 4 and 5 are out of print in the direct market of the deluxe edition, not the Gunslinger edition.
The deluxe. Okay, interesting. All right, I have to find out because that doesn't. I would hope to see that. So
I was kidding, by the way. I love both of my kids equally. I was just trying to bait. Okay, so really quick, Stuart Gordon, Reanimator. How did all that begin? Was this your brainchild? Did Dynamite come up to you? Like, how did all that start? And I'm leaving a link again for everybody that's just now joining in the description of the video, and I will post it here in the chat too.
So I had done a book. I did a few books with Blackie Shepherd for Dynamite, but one of the books I did was Vampirella versus Reanimator. And that was a book that that Blackie actually came up with. He came up with the concept and he pitched it to Dynamite. And the way he tells it, they said, if you can get Cullen to write it, then we'll publish it. So I did that book with him. And then maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it's been a long time. I was talking to them. I was talking to the folks at Dynamite. And I said, we were trying to find something else. And they suggested, would you be interested in doing a new Reanimator book with us? And I just didn't want it to be set in, I wanted to do something different with it. So what most people don't know is, Reanimator, the movie, that's its own thing. And the Dynamite Reanimator is not in the movie universe. They can't connect. I didn't even realize it. Like when I was doing, the Vampirella and Reanimator book, there was characters from the movie that I assumed could appear in the series, and I had to be dialed back on that a little bit. So they asked if I wanted to do a Reanimator book, and I said, well, let's do one, but I want to basically take it back to formula and all the other Reanimator comics are in their own universe, and this is a comic that is a direct sequel to the original Herbert West Reanimator short story. So it's set in the 20s. It's it has a sort of a different feel. It's a little more, and that original story was sort of a comedy horror thing too, but it's probably a little more serious than what you might expect with Reanimator. But the other thing I wanted to do with it was cement it in the Cthulhu mythos. I wanted to tie it into the Cthulhu mythos, and that's one of the reasons the title is Reanimator: The Eternal Lie, which is a little nod to the famous phrase from Call of Cthulhu, which is "That is not dead, which can eternal lie." And so it's a little, it takes place a few years after the original Reanimator short story. If you haven't read that story, you're okay. You know the story of Reanimator. He, he's a mad scientist. He has a formula, brings back the dead, but it takes place a few years after the original short story. And Reanimator Herbert West discovers that his formula has been stolen by nefarious individuals, and he wants to get it back. And this is sort of a quest story for him to track down who has stolen his reanimation fluid and what they're going to do with it. And they have some very, very dark plans for that formula. And Herbert West is not a good guy. He's not a hero. He is a bad guy. But what he's going up against is so awful. He's cast into the role of hero just by the nature of he's not quite as bad as they are.
Awesome. Thank you so much for explaining it. And the link, you can see all the artwork and then the different tiers that they have.
They've got some cool stuff in there. I mean, they've got like ink pens that look like syringes full of reanimation fluid. And they've got some very cool covers. We have a Francesco Francavilla cover that I think is awesome. They have some really neat pledge levels.
I was eyeing that T-shirt.
Yeah, they have the T-shirt, which I think is the one. I don't have it on my screen, but it's the one with the skull and the syringe, and that's all designed by Blackie Shepherd. There's just a lot of really cool. I think there's some enamel pins that are pretty cool. There's some neat Reanimator themed stuff there, though. If you're into that sort of thing, but it's just a fun sort of gonzo horror story that you get to see zombies fighting reanimated corpses battling with fishmen. That's kind of fun, right? Who doesn't want to see?
Yes, absolutely.
Fishmen and zombies fighting. So,
all right. Well, I think we are going to take just one more question because it's an easy question here, and it is from Mark, and he was asking, "You're doing a guest issue on Black Hammer. Are there any other creator-owned universes you'd like to write in?"
Other creator-owned universes. That's kind of a great question. Yeah, the Black Hammer issue, and I have to be careful not to reveal which character I'm writing. Okay. But the Black Hammer thing was a lot of fun for me. Well, yeah, there's a big one. Now it's an easy answer when I really think of it. I'd love to do something in the Hellboy or BTSD universes. I mean, those are so awesome, and just there's so much potential for story there. And I feel like there's room. I don't know that that's anything that would ever happen. But that would be an awesome. You
would fit right in. Your storytelling would fit right in. You get Tyler to join you, and y'all can work on a little short story.
Oh yeah, we've seen people on Twitter have asked us to try to make a Harrow County Hellboy crossover happen.
Even better.
And I think that'd be kind of awesome. I don't know what it would look like at all, but that would be kind of great.
Well, Cullen, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, please hit that like button. And I'd love to have you back sometime if you have some more free time, because when you're not, writing every book out there. And you are more than welcome to come back anytime you have a project. We can talk about that. And yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Yeah, love to be back on sometime. So keep these awesome banners handy because we'll use them again.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to throw a Magneto Omnibus on there one day, you know. And everybody, thank you for watching. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.